Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. I'm your host, Kelsey Wilhelm. Our guest tonight is Francisco da Roza, guest curator of the upcoming Hong Kong Portuguese Community Exhibition at the Hong Kong Museum of History. Alongside a successful banking career, which has taken him from Hong Kong to Sydney, New York, and further, da Roza was also the president of the Club Lusitano in Hong Kong and can trace his family links to Portugal back more than 300 years. Da Roza hopes to shed a light on the large contributions of the Portuguese community to Hong Kong over the centuries and how it shaped the SAR we know today. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me as a guest.
There is a lot that is going into this upcoming exhibition, which is going to open hopefully in 2022. Is that correct?
Indeed, there's a lot of preparation work being done. There's the research that needs to be done. There is also the collection of artifacts. We are involving principally the Club Lusitano, which is the symbol and center of the Portuguese community of Hong Kong. But also, we are also working with the CASAs and the organizations overseas where our people have immigrated to, principally North America and Australia. The timing at the moment is very opportune because, as you know, there's the Encuentro 2019 at the moment. So a lot of contacts, it's always good to have face-to-face discussions and contacts. And that the people who's left, they brought with them not only the memories, but also their practice, their traditions. And one of the things about having these CASAs and organizations is that besides having these gatherings, these sort of chatting with each other, there's also the element of promoting our heritage, our culture, and most important of all, getting the young people involved and so passing on what was passed down to us by our forebears.
And now there are, as we were speaking earlier, you mentioned that there are sort of three different types or three different groupings of people who can trace their descendants to Portugal within the region and also further abroad.
Indeed. The interesting, well, it's part history, it's part accidents of history, it's developments of history. But we all originated, if I could put it that way, from Macau. But coming to Macau itself, we were already all quite mixed, coming from India and then the Portuguese marrying with the Malaysians, with the Japanese, and so we are all quite mixed. But at this point, we start off Macau as the origin. Sometime in the 19th century, when Hong Kong was founded, our people went together with the British to help to build the newly founded British Crown Colony. But from there, because of the British commercial expansion, our people also followed the British up north to the treaty ports and principally to Shanghai. And what happened was that these groupings of people took on different characteristics and became a little bit distinct, and which I'll call them the three tribes. Our people who remain in Macau looked at that time more towards Portugal. For example, children going to Portugal to complete their studies. Our people in Hong Kong, they took on a British persona, environment, career, schooling. Some of them even took on British nationality. But on the other side, there's also the taking on of the local Chinese characters, localization. But for anything at a very basic level, survival, going to the market to buy food. So there are the two aspects, the two cultural infusion. Depending on that person's personal circumstances, for example, on the Anglicization, he could have gone to the UK to study, coming back with a clipped British accent. On the other side, there are some of us who's more localized, who's more comfortable having Chinese friends. So There's that extreme. And plus also, as you know, our people, because of the bloodlines, you could not categorize us by our looks only. But however, there are characteristics that you could identify as being a Macanese, filho da terra. For example, we all have Portuguese surnames. We are Catholics. We associate amongst ourselves. We have our ethnic food. We have our patois. And that is how we are distinct from the other Eurasians. But more than that, I also think that the British looked at us as acclimatized Europeans.
Okay.
Mother countries, Europe. Christian beliefs. And then as far as the British concerned, the sort of identification, cultural identification is closer, whereas with the Chinese, they would feel a little bit more foreign. But because our people have been here for such a long time, we are able to get along with the different peoples. And so the Chinese are more accepting of us, not as barbarian. And so we were able to play that middleman role, and we became very successful. But in the meantime, because of the British expansion up north, our people followed the British as well. We were, for example, in Shanghai, we were the middle class, we were the clerical class. But then the people in Shanghai developed a distinct characteristic as well. As I mentioned, the people in Hong Kong, the tribe in Hong Kong, have this mix of British and Chinese characteristics while retaining that Macanese because of the food, because of patois. At home, the family continued to speak patois, although the Portuguese mother tongue was lost, I would say, in one generation.
Okay.
Going to Shanghai, again, it's more of English speaking, it's more international. Shanghai was very international at that time. But then what happened was that after the change of government, the US government, the immigration policy, recognized the Europeans in China and gave priority to the Europeans in China in the immigration line.
So
our people were looked as Europeans. And so many of our people immigrate to the States. As a big settlement of our people, particularly in California. But because of the Hong Kong situation, because of the uncertainty, and there are other factors as well, our people felt that Hong Kong could no longer be their home. So many immigrated to, besides North America, to Australia as well, and some to Brazil, Sao Paulo, and Rio de Janeiro, and some back to Lisbon. But coming back here to Macau during the encontro, it's interesting, it's funny to hear one of our people speaking with an American accent with another one with an Australian accent. I'm not too sure they understand each other. But having gone abroad, they brought with them, particularly the ones formerly Hong Kong residents, they brought with them the Hong Kong traditions and customs. So we exported that popular culture. For example, in the States, during Chinese New Year, they have this practice of giving out red packets. And also, I think you'll be floored to know that, for example, the Casa de Macau in Lisbon, they have annual mahjong contests. So this is our people spreading all over the world, but coming back because Macau is home. It is the root where our people went to. Now, because of the fact from the very early days we are mixed, I think it is from that fact that we are more flexible, we're more adaptable, and that's who we are.
Now, in regards to the exhibition itself, it's going to be examining quite a bit of the Portuguese role within shaping Hong Kong. And as you mentioned, they largely made up, well, you largely made up the middle class and the buffer class in between the British and the Chinese. Now, that's something that many people did not know. You said that British brought the people to Hong Kong to help build the newfound colony, pioneers helping to build a hard and soft infrastructure of Hong Kong, clerical workers, the backbone of the civil service. Do you say that that has continued or that has definitely changed in terms of the dynamic of the Portuguese contribution in recent years?
That's definitely changed because of our people immigrating, so our numbers have gone smaller. But at the same time, Hong Kong evolved, Hong Kong changed so quickly that society-wise, we're not as outstanding as before.
Okay.
And the other thing is that our leaders have passed on. For example, Commander Salis or Sir Roger Lobo, that takes away focus. But what is relevant today for me is that recently, for example, Carrie Lam wrote in the New York Times about the basic law, what's guaranteed under the basic law. One of the guarantees is that Hong Kong has its own national team.
Yes.
That is quite special. For example, going back to the Beijing Olympic Games, a city marching its own team with its own flag, and that is a contribution of Commander Salis, one of ours, our son, who was at the time the head of the sports federation, and he fought for it and got signed that agreement with the International Olympic Federation so that Hong Kong could participate in international competitions in the city's own name. So that is a legacy of our community, and that is still relevant today.
Now, you yourself were the president of the Lusitano club in Hong Kong for about 4 years, correct?
That's right, from 2009 to 2012.
Within that role, what did you do to try and bring the focus back onto the Portuguese community within Hong Kong?
Well, I try to have more cultural events, brought people together. And I could say that the proudest moment as president was when we had one occasion during the National Day celebration. The descendants from Macau came, the descendants in Hong Kong, and the Portuguese from Portugal joined us as well. And we sang the national anthem, and there were tears in people's eyes. That was my proudest achievement.
Now, you yourself have your family has a long, you can trace your history back very, very far with Manuel Vicente arriving in Macau over 300 years ago.
That's right.
How exactly, what have you found of the story so far?
Well, the story is that he probably had legal training because he was drafting letters on behalf of the Leo Senado.
Okay, the municipal governing body at the time.
That's right. He made a fortune. Was a very powerful person, but from all accounts, not a very nice person.
Okay, well, that has definitely changed over the generations.
Thank you. He was childless.
Okay.
And he sent for his nephew, Simon Vicente. Was a condition. You come, my nephew, you inherit my fortune, but I've arranged for you to marry a certain young lady.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Money has to be in within powerful families, and that's what happened.
Okay.
Simon Vicente became even more powerful, even more influential. He was a member of the Leo Senado. He was also with the Casa de Misericordia.
Okay, okay.
In those days, that was also quite an important institution.
The Holy House of Mercy, yeah.
That's right. And then the Jesuit order owed him some money.
Okay.
And apparently the Ilha de Verde was mortgaged, and the Jesuits could not repay. And Leo Senado came out with a ruling, yes, you can take the island. So the island went to the family.
Owned Ilha Verde.
Yes.
The green island was owned. That's amazing.
Right. And
do you have any piece of it now?
Well, one of my cousins actually managed to trace back, because as you know, it's all reclaimed,
Yes.
but we identify where it is. And I have old maps to show the Ilha Verde.
That's amazing.
It is, isn't it? But money's all gone. Somebody had a good time.
Well, at least they enjoyed it, right? So, but then you yourself have an interesting link in regards to the three tribes. You have the Macau link because you came here and you studied here, but you were actually born in Shanghai.
Right. I was
And-
born in Shanghai because my grandfather was a tea buyer for Jardines.
Okay.
And he was sent to Formosa. In those days, it was Formosa, Ilha de Formosa. When my father, uncles and aunties were growing up, no English education. So my grandfather brought the family to Shanghai.
Okay.
Shanghai at that time was quite a developed metropole. So my uncles and aunties, they all grew up in Shanghai. My grandfather immigrated to Caracas, Venezuela.
Okay.
My father did not follow the family, instead came to Hong Kong.
Okay.
Coming to Hong Kong, he was fortunate because he was working for the gas company in Shanghai. The headquarters was in Hong Kong. So he switched off the light, packed up the books, brought them over to Hong Kong, and he was almost immediately employed. That was the early 1950s. Times were not so good, so we were very, very lucky. We did stop over for a little while as refugees in the refugee camps here in Macau. And after my father had settled in Hong Kong, found a place, sent for the family, we went to Hong Kong. But unfortunately, my mother passed away when we were very young. My father did something that was very wise. He brought us, the three of us, myself, my sister and my brother, back to Macau to be brought up by aunts, his side. And so we were brought up in a very, very traditional way. The church, the Catholic school, the mix with other Macanese families, the feast days, the food. And so I have that ingrained in me.
And that was during a very key element of your childhood. It was around
Indeed.
8 years old.
9 to 14 or so. That was very, so, you know, within me, because of that experience, I went to Hong Kong quite early on to complete my schooling. And I mixed with our people in Hong Kong as well. So I have that contact with the three different tribes. And within me, I have elements of each of the tribes. But my affinity is with the tribe in Macau because I grew up and formed that impression at that time. I have some very good friends. Even today, we are in touch from the days when we were growing up in Macau.
Now, the Portuguese influence in Macau is very obvious, not only from the architecture, but also from the street signs. You can see that Portuguese is still being used. But even within my own time here in Macau, it's around 17 years, I've seen that there has been a decrease in the use of Portuguese. But you had mentioned to me before we came on the show that the national policy of making Macau a platform for Portuguese-speaking countries could be helping to push that. How do you think that is doing so?
Well, I think what will happen is that it will bring attention back for parents to start to think about it. There's the commercial side. There is the national policy side of having Macau as the bridge platform to the Luso-speaking countries. But also, I am aware that within the community itself, members are pushing for more of the children to be speaking Portuguese at home. I do not know whether because of the commercial opportunities that families will start to pay attention to Portuguese again. Because at one time, even perhaps now, it's quite common to send children to Australia, closer to England, where obviously it's English speaking because of the commercial opportunities. So whether that commercial opportunities, Portuguese language would kind of bring people back to start to speak their own mother tongue again. We shall see. But as I said, in Hong Kong, people lost their mother tongue Portuguese because of the environment, because of career, because of commercial opportunities.
Now, you yourself have chosen to keep that alive, keep the culture itself alive, not only in what you're doing now as the guest curator, but also in terms of the names of your children. Antonio, André, Alexandre, very Portuguese names. Why did you and your wife make that decision?
Well, first of all, I must
Because she's not Portuguese.
No, she's Hong Kong Chinese, but she is very open-minded, and she followed my way. I'm thankful for that. There's a story behind how the names came about. She was about 7 months expecting our first one. I had a dream. I was chatting with my mother, and she was saying, I would like you to name the child after me. But I said, no, Mom, I would like to follow what Dad did, because Francisco is my father's second name.
Okay.
And so Francisco Antonio, and I said, I would like to name the child Antonio, just like what Dad did. But then she had disappeared from my dream, and I was saying to myself, what if it's a boy? That will have to be Mario, because her name was Maria.
Okay.
And so when I woke up the next morning, I told her about the dream, and we decided that if it was to be a boy, it would be Antonio Mario. If it's a girl, it would be Antoinette Marie.
All right.
Okay.
Right.
And then Antonio Mario came around. Okay. I got lazy. Okay. And I decided on Andrea Manuel.
Okay.
And then it's Alexandra Maria Elena. Elena is for my wife.
Okay.
And say today's, for example, when the bank statement comes with the initials, there's confusion.
But that means you can pass it to someone else if it's not good news. As a part of the exhibition itself, unfortunately, we're quite short on time today. But I understand there are two themes of the exhibition, which is the historical and then the Portuguese legacies, culture, and heritage. It seems like the Portuguese actually appeared in China before the British.
Around 1531, there was a big battle known as the Battle of Damon. Apparently, a very nasty fella, a soldier and a pirate, was foraging around the coast and kidnapping children to be sold in
Malacca.
In Malacca.
Okay.
And so the Portuguese were driven back. The exact location is not known, but it is thought that there was a padrão that was implanted, that stone cross as a navigation aid and as a marker, territorial marker. That is the history. But because the Portuguese were very active around the waters, we have Lama Island. Lama, as you know, Lama, Portuguese mud.
Yeah.
Portuguese sailor marked it down as mud. And the British cartographer came across it and said, oh, that's the name of the island. And so Lama Island came about.
Okay.
But, okay, the Chinese name, unfortunately, is not representative. It's just a phonetic translation.
Okay.
There is another name. It's also very, very interesting. And that is a rock that is named after the monster in Camões' poem.
Oh, really?
Adamastor.
Okay.
But it is Adamastor. It got corrupted. It's the Adamastor channel between the Lantau Island and the Chongchai Island.
Okay.
And this piece of rock in between, I suppose the Portuguese called that rock Adamastor because in a foggy day, it would appear all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Okay.
And it was described in the poem that as sailors were rounding the Cape of Good Hope, the monster appeared. And these are the stories that we'll be telling people. For example, Joss the word, Deus in God.
Deus, yeah.
Okay, there's
so for Joss sticks, it's originally God sticks.
Instant state. Okay, Min Pao from Baum. So it is all
Bao
these
meaning bread,
little surprises that we're going to tell people, and I'm sure they will love it.
Yeah. So from what I understand, you're collecting now some of the possible contributions to the exhibit itself. You're also going around and speaking with people. It looks fascinating. I can't wait for 2 years to pass and for us to be able to go see the exhibit. And thank you very much for being here.
Not at all, my pleasure.
That's all for this evening. Join us again next week for more TDM Talk Show. Good night.